Rome was never silent. Even at night, when the torches guttered low and the marble streets cooled under the stars, the city breathed, a living, restless thing. Somewhere, laughter echoed from a feast. Somewhere, a cry rose from the shadows. And somewhere, inside the palace walls, a woman who once ruled the empire's heart was about to fall into darkness. Her name was Valeria Messalina. She was 23 years old when they killed her, wife of Emperor Claudius, mother of his children, an empress of the world's most powerful city. But Rome never forgave a woman who wanted too much, and Messalina wanted everything. If you're still here with the gruesome historians, then stay close, because the story of Messalina isn't just about lust or scandal, as the old historians like to write. It's about the brutal power of forbidden desire, the kind that eats through marble, through flesh, through the soul of an empire. To understand her, you have to understand Rome, a city built on contradictions. Its citizens worshipped virtue and indulged in vice. They praised family, but lived in betrayal. They called themselves civilized, yet every banquet was a battlefield. When Emperor Caligula was murdered in 41 CE, the empire held its breath. The guards dragged his uncle, Claudius, out from behind a curtain and hailed him emperor. Claudius, the stammering scholar, the man everyone mocked for his limp and nervous laugh. He never wanted the throne, but Rome wanted order, and Claudius promised it. Beside him stood a young woman, beautiful, refined, and dangerous in ways no one yet understood. Valeria Messalina, his new wife. Barely 20 years old, descended from the same bloodline as the first emperor, Augustus. She was the perfect match for a man desperate for legitimacy. And for a time, she played her role perfectly. The loyal wife, the tender mother, the radiant empress who smiled for the crowds. But even in her perfect facade, an undercurrent of ambition flowed. Messalina saw her own desirability as a weapon, a tool far sharper than any senatorial decree. But Rome was watching, and Rome had a way of revealing the truth behind every mask. Messalina's story begins not with betrayal, but with boredom. Imagine the palace, endless corridors of white marble, guarded by silence. Servants bowed, eunuchs whispered, senators flattered, and in the middle of it all, a young woman caged by luxury. Claudius was older, thoughtful, cautious, gentle in his way, but not alive the way the city was. He studied law while she studied eyes. He read histories while she wrote her own. In the beginning, she charmed him easily. Claudius adored her. He believed her innocence, her laughter, her youth. She could ask for anything, land, jewels, favors, and he would nod with that soft, tired smile of his. But power has a strange taste. Once you've had it, even a drop, it never leaves your tongue. Messalina learned that quickly. She learned how to sway decisions, how to punish enemies through whispers, how to plant rumors that flowered into ruin. And she learned something even more dangerous: how invincible she seemed in Claudius's eyes. If you're still here in the dark, stay close. To keep this gruesome history alive, butcher that like button right now, because soon the games begin. By the time Messalina was 22, she was one of the most powerful people in Rome. The senators feared her. The courtiers obeyed her. Even the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's elite soldiers, took her gifts and kept her secrets. Her palace became a second court, a place of endless feasts and secret deals. She could raise a man to riches or bury him in ruin with a single nod. And yet beneath all the laughter and the perfume, something hollow grew in her, a hunger that nothing filled. The chroniclers say she turned to indulgence, to excess. They wrote that her hunger became a perverse obsession, a deliberate effort to shock the empire that confined her. The most infamous claims state that she regularly snuck out of the palace at night, disguised in a dark wig, to take shifts as a common prostitute in the low-class brothels of Rome's Subura district. The rumor that sealed her horrific legend was her alleged competition with Rome's most notorious courtesan in a 24-hour sexual endurance contest, a contest, we are told, which the Empress won. Maybe they lied, maybe they didn't, but these lurid tales were weaponized to portray her political ambition as pure, depraved madness, making it easier to justify her execution. But behind those stories, there's a truth Rome never wanted to admit, that women like Messalina didn't fall from grace. They were pushed. He believed in her purity long after everyone else saw the storm coming. In council, he defended her. When senators whispered, he dismissed them. He thought loyalty could survive in Rome. He didn't understand. In Rome, loyalty was the first thing sold. Claudius wasn't cruel. He was lonely. Surrounded by flatterers, by men who laughed at his back, he clung to the idea that his wife was still his ally, his one safe harbor in a sea of deceit. But his isolation was Messalina's opportunity. She used her body and her ruthless demands for fidelity from her lovers and death from those who refused her, as a private reign of terror, a shadow government of pleasure and execution. But Messalina's eyes were already wandering toward power, toward danger, toward the one man bold enough to meet her gaze. His name was Gaius Silius, a senator, handsome and ambitious, the kind of man who could make an empress forget her crown. Messalina's desperate infatuation for Silius was so potent she forced him to divorce his own wife, openly flaunting her affair, not just as a transgression, but as a public act of imperial will. At first, it was secret. Whispers, glances across marble halls, meetings behind drawn curtains. But secrecy doesn't survive long in Rome. Soon everyone knew. The guards, the slaves, even the streets themselves. And Messalina, drunk on invincibility, didn't care. She believed herself untouchable. She had Claudius's trust, the guards' loyalty, the people's awe. No one would dare challenge her. But then came the moment that shattered everything. In the autumn of 48 CE, while Claudius was away, Messalina and Silius married, in public, with witnesses, in full Roman ceremony. It was madness, or maybe it was desperation, a fantasy of escape from the gilded prison of empire. Some say Silius convinced her that Claudius was doomed, that together they could seize power. Others say she had simply lost the ability to tell fantasy from reality. Whatever her reason, Rome saw only one thing: betrayal. If you're still here, still following this descent, share this channel with anyone who deserves to hear this gruesome truth. Let others know what happens when an empire turns on its own queen. The message reached Claudius at the port of Ostia. He laughed when he first heard it, a sharp, unbelieving laugh. His wife? Married? It was absurd. But when his freedmen brought proof, names, signatures, witnesses, the laughter stopped. Something cold and ancient rose in him, the kind of fury that built Rome's empire and burned it. Claudius ordered the arrest of Messalina and Silius. Silius was executed immediately. Messalina fled. Through the palace gardens she once ruled, through shadows that no longer hid her. She took refuge in the Gardens of Lucullus, the very place she had once filled with music and feasts. Now it was silent. Only the wind moved through the cypress trees. The soldiers found her there, trembling, surrounded by the remnants of her glory. A few servants, a handful of jewels, and a sword she could barely lift. Claudius hesitated. Even then, part of him wanted to forgive her. But his advisors, Narcissus, Pallas, Callistus, reminded him of what mercy would mean: weakness, ridicule, rebellion. They told him not to see her again, because if he saw her face, he might spare her, and Rome would never forgive that. So the order was given. When the soldiers came for her, she tried to end it herself. They say her hands shook too much, and one of the guards, perhaps out of pity, perhaps out of disgust, finished it for her. The young empress who once ruled the empire's desire died in silence, her blood dark against the garden earth. When they told Claudius, he said nothing. He asked for wine, and that night Rome feasted again. The next morning, her name was erased from every inscription. Her statues were torn down, her memory condemned. Damnatio memoriae. In Rome, that was worse than death. The act of unmaking a person, of pretending they had never lived. But Rome could never quite forget her. You see her ghost in the poet's verses, in the marble faces of later queens, in every whisper about women who reach too high. Messalina became a symbol of lust, of ambition, of everything men feared in women who refused to stay silent. But maybe, just maybe, she was something else too, a mirror, because Rome itself was no different. Vain, hungry, sexually voracious, beautiful, and doomed. If you can still hear me, if you're still here in the torchlight with her ghost, subscribe to the Gruesome Historians, lest your memory be condemned to silence by the algorithm. Because we tell the stories Rome wanted to forget. Years after her death, servants swore they saw her, a woman in white wandering the Lucullan gardens at night, her eyes empty, her hands trembling, as if still reaching for the sword she couldn't lift. Maybe it's a legend, or maybe it's what happens when memory refuses to die. Historians called her evil. But evil is easy to name when you fear what you can't understand. Messalina was a product of her world, a world where women were pawns, where power was poison, where survival meant playing every role you were given until it destroyed you. Rome punished her not for what she did, but for daring to do it without apology. And so, when you walk through Rome today, when you pass the ruins, the gardens, the broken statues, remember her, not as a villain, not as a saint, but as a warning. Every empire, every dynasty, every heart that believes itself untouchable eventually meets its Messalina. Like this story, if you felt her shadow. Share it, so her voice doesn't fade again. And subscribe, if you want to keep hearing the stories history tried to bury. Because this is the Gruesome Historians, and we tell the stories that never died. They just stopped whispering.